Now, it's been a strange past few weeks for me, strange in the sense that it's just been a very busy time and I've not been able to really focus on getting the normal extended lore content through. But that is primarily because tomorrow, the 10th edition of 40k is releasing, or pre-ordering if you want to frame it that way. Now, I'll talk more about that in a minute, and I'll also mention a few other things regarding some 40k games. But today is also a channel update, which I haven't done for a long time because I only do a channel update when I feel it really needs doing, and that time is now. Hopefully I can answer a few questions. Also, people regularly ask about the channel as well, which is usually, are you going to do X piece of content? Now, already I know some of you will be writing literally as I'm saying this, just get on with the lore looting, blah 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 blah. Yes, I know, but back in the real world and having been doing this channel for over 10 years now and full time for 7, sometimes you do need to take a mental step back, take stock, clear your head, especially with the kind of content that I'm making the past few years, which is very research heavy. It takes a lot of time for me to make and you end up with your head just in words for days and days and days. Sometimes you really got to step back from that in order to really move forward in a kind of constructive way. This year has been a tricky one for me also because my first child arrived last year, and that's meant that I've had to adjust how flexible I am with my time, because previously I could basically spend the whole of every day and night on content creation, and of course now that's not so feasible. So a couple of times this year I've had a small break to kind of get my head straight, sort things out, and with Leviathan being sent out to seemingly every content creator for 40k, big and small, the past couple of weeks I've been binging putting that stuff together, and it's been very good to take that break. But after this weekend my plan is to get straight back hard into the lore content. But that's not all. As I said, I've got a few other things to mention. First of all, I want to kind of do a channel refresh and update at some point. That's probably just going to be visuals for the channel banner and so forth, no big deal there. But also I'm likely going to try and start doing an odd stream again, because I couldn't do that for the longest time because of the strain on my vocal cords, which has improved considerably in the past couple of years, but it does still restrict what I can do, and my voice even today is not fantastic. Then there's some other content alongside 40k that I'll talk about shortly as well, things like the Apocalypse series, Dread, some other original stuff that I've been working on. So that was a page of intro script, but let's talk about 10th edition, just how I'm feeling about it, the state of things and what it can mean for GW. I may do a live stream actually tomorrow morning to, in real time, just see what kind of a state of affairs it is, so if you want to come and hang out with me, do that tomorrow. So 10th edition, Leviathan box orders, let's talk about that. So it's arrived, the 10th edition of 40k is upon us. Some might say too soon, some may say not soon enough. I think for myself what I really want to see is for them to just stick to this one for a good period of time, come what may, provided it of course doesn't just crash and burn somehow in the first 12 months. Now, as with seemingly every other content creator, I was sent a box and I've spent the past few weeks painting what I can from it. You can see my progress, and when I get the whole thing done very soon, I'm going to put a showcase video together as I've done previously. But I will say the new Tyranid sculpts are very nice indeed, and the Marines you can never really get tired of, or I don't anyway. The set is what you'd expect: rulebook, mission cards, a fat stack of plastic. That's basically it. You don't need an unboxing for it. In terms of 10th edition and where it sits, to give some perspective, 2nd edition 40k that I pretty much started with lasted over a 5-year period from 1993 to 98. 3rd edition did 6 years from 98 to 2004. 4th and 5th editions lasted 4 years each, but then things started to speed up. 6th edition was just 2 years, 7th was 3, as was 8th and 9th. So the past 3 editions have all lasted about 3 years, and that means with 10th coming in now, we shouldn't expect to really see a new one until mid-2026. But I think it all depends on how well it's going at that point. It also remains to be seen just how codexes are going to be implemented. Presumably the 40k rules and data cards will still remain free online, and I think what will be critical is that if they're sticking to this format that anybody can get into 40k by just downloading the rules and data cards, the codexes when they come are going to have to be sure to not contain anything that is prohibitive in terms of being necessary to play and that isn't available to download freely, but we'll have to wait and see about that. If these free data cards for factions are just a placeholder until the official codex comes along, I think that's going to seem a little bit of a bitter pill. But still, there is somewhat of a sunny side to it, which is that even if that were the case, at least then with 10th, you're not going to be in that situation that was seen with 8th and 9th, where you have factions waiting over a year or more to see their new rules, and then have them immediately be invalidated by a new edition. Now, whilst 10th edition is of course a big release event for tabletop players, I've been musing about how to talk about it. And I came eventually to the obvious conclusion that this is not a tabletop channel. I don't really have a carefully lit studio to do battle reports from. I don't have a range of washed small stones and scatter pebbles to throw against my artisan terrain pieces. I wish I did, but I don't. There are some great channels who do tabletop who already have some blinding tutorials for 10th. I would recommend Tabletop Tactics as one of the best walkthroughs I've seen with, quite honestly, amazing production values. Winters and Liam are always good fun. I like to check those guys out as well. And whilst I do want to play this new 10th edition of 40k, I really do, I've been reminded that one of the biggest things about 40k is that it can be enjoyed in completely different ways. For example, would I have tried to get Leviathan even if I wasn't going to be actually playing the game? Yeah, I probably would have, and the same could be said for Indomitus. When somebody says they want to get into 40k, that's a pretty open statement. For some people, it's going to be about one single aspect: the lore, the painting, the gaming, or a combination of all of these. I've often seen friends or read your comments where people start out in one place here on the lore, and then they buy their favourite characters in miniature form. They just want to have one or two. Then they maybe have a small army just to try it, and eventually they end up in the full tabletop realm. For myself, as I've said before, I'm really 60% the lore, 35% painting, and 5% playing. But that's something I would genuinely like to shift a little, as I have currently my pretty massive Ultramarines army that last time I checked came in about 10,000 points, the Necrons, which I haven't totaled up but probably around 4 to 5k, the Inari, which are in progress and a pretty modest but decent force between 2 and 3k, and then now with this new set I've finally been pushed to starting out my stockpiled Tyranids, which I have plenty more of than just the Leviathan box. I'll also have a secret first phase of a new army coming pretty soon that I'm going to showcase here, and I have a couple of other things in the future to do which realistically aren't going to get a look in until about this time next year, but those are pretty cool as well. So I am genuinely interested in the 10th edition, but as I'm not a game playing tabletop channel, it would have been kind of silly for me to really set up and do some big tabletop showcase here, because that isn't the channel and it would have been a bit weird and jarring. But I do want to play 10th, and I do want to be able to get into it more than I have done previously. It feels a good time to do it right now while the new rules are out. You've got half a chance of getting your head around all the bits and pieces. So yeah, excited for 10th, that's all well and good. But specifically, what about this Leviathan set that's coming out? Well, GW seem confident that they have produced enough boxes to meet demand, but in fairness they've been confident with every major release since about 2019, and they've continually sold out in seconds. As I've repeatedly stated with the Indomitus set, that was a debacle, but they did turn it around by making it made to order in about 24 hours, which did at least undermine the scalpers on eBay who all had to drop their prices pretty quickly. If that were to also happen this weekend, I would be hopeful that by Monday we would see the same thing. But the fact that they've said that the Leviathan set will be available in the next 2 weeks means that they're either being wildly optimistic or they genuinely believe that they've produced an insane amount of product to be able to actually meet demand, and they're confident about it. I mean, it really is going to be quite interesting just to see if they can meet demand or not. Even if they can though, it doesn't necessarily instill full confidence in me that suddenly, immediately this is going to be the case with every other product going forward. But at least it's something, I suppose. But this honestly is a thing that's killing my enthusiasm lately for the tabletop side of things in this past year. As we talked about recently, and as many people have, it's just these continual massive production problems that they're having. And the fact that now professional scalpers are setting up Discord servers to target limited releases, I'd personally prefer to see far less limited edition sets now and more of a focus on maintaining base stock levels. Because something I've heard repeatedly is that instead of being an exciting, fun thing when these new releases come out on a Saturday, for a lot of people it's becoming a stressful and miserable exercise. Crashing websites, clicking on your basket to see the products instantly unavailable, seeing the same product on eBay immediately for 3 times the RRP. It's really crushing people's spirit. This all is very negative and it's been getting me down mentally in the past months, quite honestly, because with GW never ever addressing anything like this directly, it feels like they genuinely just don't care. And in some ways, as I've said before, maybe they don't. But that seems hard to believe in the fact of how they are engaging with the community in other ways. And if we were to just put our rational hats on for a minute, I do think that part of this is to do with just having to scale up their infrastructure side of things for production, as I talked about recently, and it's down again to specific supply issues from overseas. So this is a thing that's still happening in specific product areas. But on the more optimistic side of things, if things do end up not going totally smoothly this weekend, It's worth considering that, as usual, all the models produced in the Leviathan box set are going to be available down the line. Now, cold comfort if you wanted the box set, but it's true. And usually these come pretty soon after a box release, and everything else is going to be there, like the rulebook, the mission cards as well. But even actually without those physical things, with 10th edition, people who enjoy tabletop and already have armies can pretty much enjoy playing the game right out of the gate. You just might have to wait if you want those physical products, or maybe not. Maybe they're just going to have tons of stock, we'll see. I think whatever happens tomorrow, it's worth considering that while there will inevitably be issues with scalpers turning up on eBay, there will surely be plenty of hobbyists who do get the box. I think in this specific instance that's genuinely going to be the case. But also, as always with these bundle sets, there's people who are going to get them who don't necessarily want either of the factions, the Tyranid or the Marines. And you'll often see those up on eBay, for example, potentially with a reasonable price adjust. Similarly, if you didn't even want the box itself, but you just wanted the rulebook or the card set, I'd imagine that those are going to be in a similar position. There's always people who buy boxes to break them down and sell them in their component parts, and usually, yeah, they do add a little bit on, of course, but it's more tolerable, and that might actually be less for somebody rather than having to buy an entire box set. So I will likely probably be live tomorrow morning on Twitch. We can have a morning chat while we watch everything burning down, so come along and we can hang out. I'll probably have some more Rogue Trader beta codes as well to give away. So next update in regard to lore for the channel. I want to try and make a concerted effort to wrap up some of the things that have been loose threads for me for some time. So we're talking about Dark Origins, we're talking about Vigilus, the Space Marine series continuing, and so on. That's my priority at the moment, starting literally this next week. Then of course other things that have just been in the back of my head for ages I want to talk about. Off the top of my head, Imperial Guard, Necron Deeper Dive, Tyranid Revisit in order, undoubtedly something Orcs needs a look in, who knows what else there could be there, Armageddon, Gorka, etc. Beyond that, Necromunda stuff you can drill into, some speculative things as always. Quite honestly, just all of that right there should see us to the end of the year, and I think undoubtedly always the option to look into specific characters, Primarchs as well, things like this. So lots to do there, and quite honestly far better to just crack on with it than talk about it too much, which is exactly my plan. In terms of other content like that Apocalypse series I started, it's something I want to get on with also as soon as possible as I can, because in terms of a script a lot of that is at least roughly prepped, excuse the pun. I'm sure a little bit of Dread wouldn't go amiss, and I wanted to do something that explains to people how on earth you start reading Dread, because that's a question I've had quite often, and it's something that can be a bit confusing unless you want to just dive in at random. But overall, that's my place at the moment in terms of lore content. Could try and throw a few random things in the mix as always, the classic weapon videos, worst fates, etc. But we'll play this by ear. Now, the next thing I want to make mention of, and I want to keep it relatively brief, is that over the past 6 to 8 months, I've begun steadily world building my own fictional verse. I've mentioned this a little on the community tab recently, but I wanted to speak about this as something which is upcoming, because I'm just curious to see people's thoughts, although again I'm not going into details here. I've gone into this project though fully understanding that it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I am hopeful that it may do well enough that it becomes worthwhile in terms of my time investment for the channel. Because if it was well received by you all, the viewers, it's something I could just run with month after month. Essentially, I'm writing a narrative, it's science fiction, but instead of doing all this and then trying to get it published as, say, a book or something, and not being able to do so for like a decade because publishers just turn you away, it seemed an interesting idea to try and channel it into some YouTube content. I'm still working through various aspects, but something I realised recently is that if I'm not careful, this could be the kind of open-ended project that you could spend years just refining and procrastinating over, because sifting through every detail of an imagined world is very fun and satisfying, and thinking, oh, I need to go off here and I need to make this part work, I need to construct this to make this work, I need to rationalize this. Even if you're doing it for nothing other than your own enjoyment, it can just spin out and go on and on and on. And so recently it came into my head that I think it's always true that if you ever want to actually get something moving forward, you've got to put it out there, which is of course a terrifying thing to do, but it's better than just sitting around procrastinating on what might have been. If you don't try, you'll never know, etc. Now, I started working on this when I realised doing, let's say, any other kind of fan-fictional stuff, that could be problematic. So I thought, okay, instead I'm going to try something, I'm going to pull together my own ideas, thoughts, concepts, human elements that I've always found intriguing that could be enjoyable in steadily constructing your own narrative. You guys know I'm interested in like the fall of civilizations and how people rise up, and different, of course, science fiction concepts about travel and so forth, all these kind of different things, trade networks that we've talked about in other things, civilizations, factions, structural mechanics, civilization ideologies, all this kind of stuff. Building this in your own mind and constructing a world, that's really exciting and enjoyable. I've shown some aspects of it to a few close people so far and had actually good responses, which was pretty heartening. These are friends who I know who would give me solid, objective opinions, but there's still a considerable amount more I want to do on it. The audience on the channel here, you've always been very positive about any fanfictional or other adjacent projects that I've tried to do, so I think that this was worth a try. If it can do as well as some of the other things that I've tried, perhaps with some adjacent Patreon support, it could be worth the time that I've assigned to it. But I think the key thing is to just get on with making a start in rolling it out, which I plan on doing with a series of shorter stories that will focus on key civs, factions, small lore segments as well within, steadily building to a broader picture. As I say, I'm hopeful this could capture people's imaginations, because if it does, it's something I can really run with. But at the same time, I want to keep my expectations prepared and grounded, because however it turns out, it's better to try than not at all, I figure anyway. Because at the end of the day, I'm not a published author. I've never attempted anything like this before, so I'm sure it's going to be pretty rough for me in terms of feedback from those who love it, those who are indifferent, and people who inevitably will tell me to throw it all in the bin. But I think ultimately, and also thankfully, I've been doing YouTube long enough now that any truly negative comments tend to just wash over you and trust in the stats. Because for every 10% of negative comments, you need to look at the other 90% who are positive, and the often 10 times more than that who watched the video, liked it, and didn't comment. Because on YouTube, the silent majority are actually a pretty powerful block of data in terms of validating any new YouTube projects. So that's it, I've put it out there now. Hopefully I'll have something for you guys, maybe in about 4 weeks' time. And of course, it's going to be difficult for you guys to really give thoughts on this because I've been so vague about it, but I think that's how I want it to be. I think I want to bring it to you guys without any prior expectations. The other small fan-fictional stories, things that I've done previously, people have been, ranging in comments, but mostly pretty positive, and you guys are always telling me that you just want more stuff to listen to in terms of me talking. So I'm excited to see what people think, but the best thing I can do is just get back to it, crack on, and bring it to you guys as soon as possible. But of course, from what I've said today, if you have some thoughts, please drop them in the comments. Then lastly, okay, games. This is going to be a pretty brief rundown of things. So, Bolt Gun came out recently. As somebody who bloody loves retro FPS, especially modded stuff like Brutal Doom, Bolt Gun is a fantastic adaptation. Fast, very intense gameplay. If you throw the difficulty up, also the taunts voiced by the excellent Rahul Kohli.
My love of the Imperium is matched only by my hatred of the
You face off against cultists, scum, heretic Astartes and demons, and quite honestly, what else is there to say than that? It's brutal, fast, slaughtering action, and I bloody love it. Recommend highly. Rogue Trader, the CRPG game, is on the horizon for this year, has recently come out with its beta update. This is a closed beta for people who have pre-ordered the game, and this update contains a ton of new content. However, they did give me a bunch of codes for it. You don't need to have pre-ordered, so if you want a chance to get one of the codes, please come hang out in my Twitch stream. Like I say, I'll probably be doing one tomorrow, and then maybe later in the week. For the actual game though, I've been having a really enjoyable time, as you can see on the stream I did recently. The writing for the game is excellent, which you would hope, given that it's a story-driven narrative game, and I love that when you're answering dialogue in it, it doesn't force you to just go through every single option in order to progress, which adds a lot of replayability there as well. The combat is turn-based and it plays out pretty much how you would imagine. In some respects this can be a little bit jarring though, I always think, because you might have something like a Sororitas missing shooting a cultist at point-blank range, but it is what it is. That's something you just have to suspend disbelief over the sake of the mechanics of the game system. The psychic powers and melee attacks that can hit multiple enemies, very satisfying to see and engage. So yeah, looking to play some more Rogue Trader, I recommend checking it out or at least looking it up. Now, Darktide. It's had a lot of small updates in the past months, but honestly, nothing quite like how we imagined it to be from the outset, and that's including for myself. The way the game was described, the way it was laid out, was a much different picture than how things have been. And I'm going to be brutally honest, I think Darktide is a visually stunning game, it's engaging and immersive, and it sets the tone for a 40k game, but it's, as many people have commented, the story has really been very thin on the ground. I applauded the devs in working with me on that first video because it was unusual to give such amount of access to the narrative which looked into the lore, and the release of the game was extremely fun and exciting to play. But since that time, in the post-release, handling of it has been a different story. I still actually enjoy the game. I'm even looking to play some literally this next week. But I really think it was a mistake to delay the release of this first big content update. That was on their timeline to release, and I really think they needed to have stuck to that, and not doing so obviously brought some negative community feeling when they had stated about having this specific roadmap for content post-release, but they decided to instead focus on fixing the mechanical aspects of the game, as there was also critical community feeling about those aspects of the game. And so when they were faced with these two different things, they opted to fix first and then do the content. But I personally really think it should have been the other way around, because they have been giving small updates, but really the last time we were hearing about these big content patches etc. was back in February, and since then there's been a small amount of content drops, some couple of levels, but nothing that really moves things forward significantly. It's not really a good situation, and we need to see that full content release as soon as possible. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on it, but yes, it's not the best situation. Information around Space Marine 2 continues to be very sparse, which is not surprising as it's likely still a ways off from release, but what we have seen is very exciting. The most recent trailer revealed to us that it's going to have an option of 3-player co-op, which is of course amazing news, and also going to leave people fighting over who gets to be Titus, I'm imagining. The game looks visually stunning, as it has done throughout all of their content releases so far. They appear to have kept the narrative of Titus ongoing, which I think doing anything else would have been very poorly received. I think the biggest thing people are thinking about though is the amount of visuals on screen. The biggest question really, I think, hanging over Space Marine 2 is performance based. The previous game came from a totally different era of gaming. It was over a decade previous. And while it looks stunning in this new visualization, there are baseline expectations these days. A lot of modern games have a habit of coming, especially to PC, with seemingly little, if any, true optimization. So for as epic as Space Marine 2 is looking right now, let's pray that the mechanics are as intuitive and immersive as the original, so you really feel the ebb and flow, the engagement of battle. And let's hope that it's not an 80 gig download which bounces between 30 and 60 FPS on an average 30 card rig. So that's my thoughts about the channel and some other stuff, the impending 10th edition. If there's some dramatic turn of events with regard to 10th over the weekend, I might make some comment about that next week, but otherwise it's straight on with the lore. Pleased as always to hear all of your thoughts, especially regarding my narrative project. Like I said, in fairness, it might be difficult to really give any thoughts on it beyond just general interest, as I've said nothing about it yet, but I think genuinely better that way, to be honest. I'll just drop the short stories as and when, and what will be, will be. So that's about it. Good luck with 10th weekend, and I'll see you all in the next one, which will be Vigilus.